Started. Before we welcome our guests, let's ground ourselves and prepare our hearts to gather ourselves in a space of receiving. So let's take in our surroundings, take a deep breath, settle into wherever you are. Of course, again, if you are driving, please don't close your eyes down. But we just want to take just a little bit of time. So let's go ahead and take a nice big inhale in through the nose and exhale it out. And just notice your surroundings. Maybe look around, take in everything that your eyes see and the temperature even of the space that you are in. And then let's take a nice big deep breath in through the nose and begin to lower your gaze or close your eyes down. And notice what is beneath you. Maybe you're seated on a chair or a couch, or maybe even the ground. Maybe you're standing, maybe you're walking. Just be aware of the earth beneath you, whatever is supporting you. And keep with your breaths. And try to make your inhales as long as your exhales. And then if you can, if you're in a space where this feels suitable, go ahead and cup your hands right at your heart space. And then place all of your compassion, your gratitude, and your love for yourself in the palm of your hands. And this might mean whispering words within your heart that I am grateful for, fill in the blank. Maybe an I am statement, I am, fill in the blank. And then we're going to take 3 nice big breaths into the beauty of those words, the palm of your hands. Take a nice big breath in and exhale the air out. 2 more breaths in and out. Last and final breath in through the nose and out of the mouth this time. And begin to blink your eyes open. We are here. I am so proud to introduce another very special person to me, who's actually my boss, really, and a fellow yoga practitioner, Johannah Bradley. She is a founder and fearless leader of Empower Yoga, located in Claremont, California, and Rancho Cucamonga, California. She is a mom to 3 adult children and is an adventure enthusiast. She loves to travel and spend her free time traveling and camping. And I am so glad you are here. Welcome, Johannah. It is just a privilege to have you here.
Thank you, Christine. I'm so honored to be here, truly.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself, family, career. Just give us kind of like a little Johannah story of how, we can get to know you a little bit more about you.
Currently, like you mentioned, my career is running Empower Yoga, the studios in Rancho and Claremont. We also have a retail store and a fitness and climb studio in Claremont. My children are 26, 23, and 20, so I have 3 grown, beautiful children. And so I'm kind of transitioning out of the young child phase of life and into what it means to be a mother of adult independent children. I have 3 beautiful but also very time-consuming dogs at my house right now that I adore, that have definitely taken the space and my energy from
and they don't
when
talk
I used
back.
to. Yeah, they don't talk back. They do bark though, a lot right now. So yeah, and like you mentioned, I like to spend a lot of my time camping, doing travel where I'm able to. We're able to do yoga retreats through the studio, which is a wonderful way to incorporate travel with my work.
Yeah.
And then also independent travel where I'm able to just seeing the world and learning more.
What's been your favorite place you've visited?
My heart is in Mexico for a number of reasons. I actually graduated from high school in Mexico. I lived there my senior year in high school as a foreign exchange student, and it just became a part of my heart. And so recently we were able to do a yoga retreat in Mazunte, Mexico, in the state of Oaxaca, which is where I lived long ago. And it's just a magical place. That's the best way I can say it. So even though I've been a number of times, it really is probably my favorite place to visit. It just feels like home in a strange way. Yeah.
That's really
and the people are incredible. And then there's the food. Don't even get me started on the food.
Oh gosh, right?
It's really, Mexico in general, but especially the state of Oaxaca, like I can't even describe it.
Yeah, that's so cool. I did not know that about you.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to learn lots of new things about you today.
I have stories.
Oh my gosh. How has it been like with the transition of not having like little kids in the house? Like how have you done with that transition into, I am similarly in a similar transition in life, and I'm always curious, like, how are you?
It's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Right?
As tends to be the case, I feel, with all life transitions.
Right?
I've heard people talk about it, but until I'm there, I don't realize just the levels, I think, and the layers of feelings associated with it. Because it's been, for me, especially as an only parent for the last 10 years, such a huge part of my identity. And it was the kind of bottom line in any decision I would make is, what about what's best for the kids? Or, you know, it's got to be about the kids. And now they're finding their own way. They're becoming independent, which is beautiful and exactly what we want for our children. And I'm in a weird way having to kind of find my own purpose and independence.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's different, very different.
Very different. Yeah. It's definitely like you just have to parent differently. You're still their parent, but it does transition into a friendship. Sometimes not always the best friendship.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is definitely a transition.
Yeah,
that's
it's
for
a new role.
Yeah.
It's a completely new role, and I'm getting used to it.
Yeah, it's definitely. I'm there with you. I get it. Yeah. So I was thinking about, like, I've asked this question to lots of people recently, and I've really, even for myself, thought about this question. But what is your why?
For
life in general, for everything that you are doing, the impact that you're making. What is your why?
I think ever since I was very young, I remember always thinking I want to help other people. It sounds pretty straightforward, and I think probably a lot of us are driven by that. But when I questioned any kind of purpose or divinity or anything, it always came back to that for me, is that how could I make a positive impact on the world as a whole, and particularly through other people. Yeah. And also then through life and through parenting and through all these different phases, definitely there have been times where it's switched more to honestly surviving, like taking care of myself enough and my close family enough that we can persevere and survive. But I feel like when I'm able to get back to the bigger why of helping other people, I just feel more grounded and more purposeful. More things make sense.
Yeah, right. More clarity. Yeah, that's really cool. I love that. And so with that, because I'm sure this is part of your why, but tell us just a little bit about your journey to yoga, what brought you to yoga, the impact that yoga has had on you. I know there's more to the story than that, but maybe just tell us a little bit about your journey to yoga.
Yeah. I like to share my upbringing a little bit because it was pretty different than most people's upbringings, I believe, in that the town I grew up in and the family I was born into were very interested in New Age methodologies, in Eastern philosophies. My dad was a Zen Buddhist monk who did zazen for an hour every morning and then sutra chanting for another hour. And wore his robes and walked up and down the hill, waking up the morning, banging pots and pans.
Wow.
That's how I grew up in Ashland, Oregon, where it was all around us. We would almost joke you couldn't walk down the street without someone reading your aura or So I was exposed to yoga at a very young age.
How was that? Were you kind of like, at one point, like when you were growing up, were you like, can I just walk down the street and like nobody say anything to me? I just want to walk.
You know how it is when you're growing up is you know what you know.
Yeah, right.
That's all
true.
I knew.
Yeah,
we were
true.
at Buddhist temples. We were, the Raj Harishi, who they did that whole documentary about, had a commune just up the street from our house. So there were people in orange robes banging tambourines, walking up and down the hill where I grew up. And there was a healing center right across the driveway from us where people did scream therapy. So we would hear screaming at 8 o'clock at night as I was going to bed for school the next day. But that seemed normal because part of it's all I knew. Yeah, it's all I knew. My parents made tofu for a living, and were artists. And it just seemed normal. It wasn't until later where I was like, oh, not everyone grew up this way.
Like, what do you mean you don't go to bed with screaming?
Exactly. And all these different, mandalas. And, I practiced meditation a lot with my dad growing up and was taught just a lot about Buddhism, Zen Buddhism specifically. So again, that was just kind of the framework, which there's a lot of similarities between Buddhism and yoga philosophy. So it just kind of was part of my DNA. People practiced. I was taught Shirsasana 1 at like 5 years old. We didn't necessarily call it, wasn't like a yoga class, but we did yoga.
Yeah, it was just part of your life. That's
Exactly. But it's particularly relevant because then there have been times in my life when I've had to turn away from that. So then I took my first formal yoga class at 18 at Pitzer College. I was going to Scripps Women's College. That's what brought me to the Southern California area to go to school. And you could take classes at the other colleges. So I signed up for a Kundalini yoga class. And I love sharing that story because it was so different than my experiences going forward. There were about 200 people in the auditorium, and Kundalini does a lot of activation in the core. So we're all these college students who were eating ramen and stuff and doing our first yoga class together, swerving our bellies. And everyone started farting. It just like the whole auditorium was farting. And I thought, and then we started giggling because we're 18. It was hilarious.
I would have giggled now.
I mean, it was just so consistent. And the poor teacher was an amazing teacher in retrospect, but just kept things going. And I thought, this stuff's crazy. I probably will not pursue this.
Oh my gosh. That's
now I understand so much more. But I think it's funny because there's so many different types of yoga, and we hit, different awarenesses at different parts of our lives. I love Kundalini now. Also, my diet's better, so it doesn't necessarily have the same impact.
Right.
And then, I kind of took a little bit of a break. I was always kind of doing yoga on and off because then I had children really young. And the kids were born, it becomes a little hard, but then we got back to kind of a vinyasa style yoga I was doing regularly. And it was always part of my life. And a lot of it was to make my body feel good.
Yeah.
Right. That was the big transition that happened. I was never that athletic. I was never great at catching a ball. And yoga was something I could physically be really successful at. It made me feel strong and it made me feel open. Later in life, that changed. I still feel open and good physically, but it became so much more when I needed more.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my very high level journey.
Yeah. No, I love that. So on a lighter note, this is off script.
Yeah.
Do you read? You have a favorite movie? You binge watching anything? Like, what's your style, like your genre of like entertainment?
I think, I get a lot of joy out of being a little bit of an enigma, like loving yoga, loving deep yoga philosophy, but then also I love like super superficial pop culture. I love hip hop music and 80s music and, not tons of reality shows, but I really like kind of binge-worthy, not really high-quality content all the time. It's just a lot. You know, I like to take it easy and know what you're going to get. So, I think right now, especially if I have kind of TV going in the background, like I really like the Great British Baking Show. It's really fun and just kind of lighthearted.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe if I listen to that enough and watch that enough, I'll through osmosis become a good baker. Or get an English accent. Either would be fine.
I know, right?
So far, neither one has happened. And as far as music, everyone who knows me knows I like a lot of different music, but George Michael is my absolute great love of my life. And one of my dogs is named George Michael. So with the Wham documentary that came out and the George Michael documentary not long before that, that's really where I think I've seen the Wham documentary 7 times now.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah, that's a binge watching. Even if it's the same thing over and over again.
I love the music.
Oh my gosh. I love that.
Yeah. So that's as lighthearted as it gets for sure.
I know we all need a little reality trash TV every once in a while.
It's just relief. Good.
Yeah. It is. It is. Okay, so as we transition just into your story, I can't wait for your story to be shared because when you shared it with me, at first I was like, oh my gosh, wow. And the only thing that I kept thinking and why I introduced you as somebody who has such resilience, but also just this deep vulnerability. And I appreciate that so much because there's just so much transparency. Like there's just this and there's a safety that is created with you when you tell your story because you allow other people to feel that same safety. So I really appreciate that. I'm really excited for our listeners to hear your story. And just thank you for your willingness to share it. So you've got the floor. Just share your story, and then love you to maybe even incorporate, because I know that yoga has been such a healing modality in your trauma story. And so just if you could share that as well.
Absolutely. And thank you for what you said. That touches me deeply. I don't think I always know that's the case. So thank you so much. So I shared a little bit about how I had practiced yoga, how I came down to Southern California. I met my husband when I was 18 years old, my freshman year at college. I got married when I was 20. I had my daughter 6 months later, so you do the math.
Yeah.
There was a reason we set the wedding date pretty fast. And I was 21 when beautiful Devin was born, and a junior in college. She was born the summer between my junior and sophomore year. I managed to graduate college with a 10-month-old daughter.
Wow.
And didn't miss any classes or anything like that. So I'm really proud of that, and started working immediately afterwards at a corporate job because we needed health insurance and stuff for our baby. Needed to buy diapers, all that kind of stuff. And I ended up working at that job for quite a long time, did some different things, but I had a really lucrative corporate career in sales and marketing, and kind of did that thing. We decided pretty consciously to go ahead and have more children early rather than take like a long span, and wait. So then we had James in 1999 and Jackson in 2003. And we had my husband, Matthew, in retrospect, had mental health issues, likely bipolar, potentially schizophrenic. It's hard to say because it wasn't really diagnosed, but it made things complicated. He was also brilliant, like an incredible musician, super handsome, probably the love of my life, father of my children, all of that. So it wasn't an easy marriage. It was complicated for a number of reasons. But in about 2012, after I think 16 or so years of marriage, things really started getting tough. There was some indiscretion. Things were starting to fall apart and come to the forefront that hadn't really previous to that. And it kind of aggravated his mental illness, his addiction. And it also threw me off the deep end. I'm not going to pretend like I was holding my stuff together. I was not. Now, in retrospect, I can see that I was just so activated, and didn't have necessarily the regulation skills. I did okay, but I try and give myself grace for that. But it was really a challenging time. So there was a lot going back and forth there. In February of 2013, my mom thought she had a flu and ended up in the hospital, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. While all this was going on, she was only 67, which I knew was young at the time, but as I get older, is like so young. She was still working, all these different things. And when I came home from the hospital from kind of getting that information, Matthew was really in a bad way. And that's the night that he was arrested for domestic violence. I had to call the police because things got violent at the house. The arrest and everything that was going on, all of it really, I think, aggravated everything even more, pushed us into another level. So honestly,
and was he having like were there parts where you could see, oh, this was kind of like leading up? Was he having like episodes or anything like that? Or was there kind of like trigger, like you were like, oh wow, like this really triggered him? Or
yeah, I think it was so much chaos at that point, and so much anger and so much addiction. There were, and honestly, in our family, there were definitely prescription drugs involved, but it's alcohol. Like alcohol is not a joke, as far as addiction. I think people tend to think that, it's something that can be less severe, but it really, really can be extremely severe. Yeah. And so because he was so activated in his addiction as well at that time, I think there was just no predicting what was going to happen. Yeah. He was when that happened, he was on some prescription medication, but I think he was extremely drunk too. Yeah. So, and there was just a lot of anger, and when there's no filter, no regulation, I think anger comes out in such a unpredictable way. Yeah. And there had been other little things, leading up to that. I mean, the best way I can say it is it was just in our house was complete chaos for months, maybe a year. Yeah.
And how old were your kids at this time?
Jackson was about 10, James was about 13, and Devin was about 16.
Yeah. So like even as a mom, little, like wanting to protect them and shield them from everything, I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
Weightiness on you.
Yeah. And in complete lack of control.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is I didn't feel like I had any control. I didn't necessarily feel like I had control over my own emotions and regulation. I definitely didn't have control over Matthew, even though I tried so hard. That's the story of my life. I don't know if anyone else relates to that, but like wanting to be able to, if I say the right thing, or if I do the right thing, if I, can communicate like the kids need X, Y, or Z, then it'll be okay. And it wasn't. In a perfect world and in retrospect, I wish I would have just gotten the kids and myself 100% out of that situation. There were plenty of indications, and I could have hardlined and made it stop. It would have been really hard. And that's tough, honestly, because I just wasn't capable at the time.
Well, and also just like you said at the beginning, like he was the love of your life. Yeah. And you can't stop loving somebody because they're not well.
Yeah. And I tend to be an optimist who always believes that things will get better. And it seemed very harsh. I had smart people tell me that that's what I needed to do, but I wasn't able to at that time. So I think that's an important message too, is just, the best way I could have protected my kids would have been to draw a really straight line, because there was plenty of indication of where, of the severity of what was happening, I guess. Yeah. Then through a series, my mom ended up passing away only like a month later. It was very fast from diagnosis to passing away. So these are other additional reasons. I mean, the best way I can describe it, my life was just complete chaos. Like I was in chaos. Bringing it back to yoga, I still was able to practice some yoga at this time. And this is when it started, even though I wasn't completely regulated by any means. It gave me like moments of connection and moments of reprieve is the best way I can say it. It's the only time I felt like I was in my body or coming to myself. So it already was a tool.
When I was talking to you about you, when you tell me your story, it was like the only time where your brain wasn't like going like, just like,
Exactly.
it was like the only time where you could kind of like settle a little bit, feel some sense of peace.
Yeah.
So
people would, and that's why I like to share that I grew up meditating, because I had the skill set. Like I knew how to do silent meditation, but when you're in trauma, and particularly later as I moved into PTSD, which is very different, I couldn't sit and meditate in silence. And I just have a really strong feeling that integrative meditation is such a valuable tool. And anyone who says you have to do it this way, it has to be, you know, under this structure, is wrong, because you have to have it meet you where you're at. And for me at that time, I could meditate when I was standing on one foot, holding my toe out to the side, because so much of my body was focused on that, that I could come back to my breath. And that was meditation for me. So it already was a tool. It was also really hard to, you know, leave the kids. I was still going to work. I mean, it was just complete chaos at that time. And then my dad was late onset Alzheimer's. So my mom had been taking care of him. She passed away. My sister and I started caring for my dad. My sister really stepped up and took the majority of that responsibility, but nonetheless, there were months where I had my late onset Alzheimer's dad at my home, Matthew and his like deep addiction and anger. I honestly, I did the best I could with the kids. I got him to school, you know, for the most part. Got him for the most part. You know, it was rough. It was really rough. That's the best way I can say it. I'm not, it's weird. I was about to say I'm not proud of some of the behavior at that time, but at the same time, when I say it out loud, like what was going on and how bad it was, I'm super proud. We survived. That's the best way I can say it. The fact I'm alive and the fact they're alive. It really is not to shake a stick at, so to speak, because it was so bad. So on August 11th in 2003, after we were like starting divorce proceedings, and then we'd kind of back them off, and it was just this back and forth and back and forth. And more had happened. And so I said, that's it. I can't do this anymore. We have to, you know, be done. He came into the room. We were taking turns, like at the house with the kids, and it was my night on Saturday. He came into the room Sunday morning, and Jackson was my youngest son, who was 10 at the time, was in bed with me. And he came in, and he had gone to the liquor store. His alcoholism was so bad at that time. He would literally just wake up in the morning and drink like a handle or more of vodka. And he shared some stories with me that were so devastating. But he got the older kids like cream soda and brought it to them. And my daughter had 2 friends over. They were downstairs sitting in the living room. My son James was there with them. He came upstairs and started saying, like, I want my family back. I don't want you guys to leave me. And I said, I can't do this anymore. And he, I could tell, was like super, super activated. So I got out of bed. And it's strange how our nervous system can snap into like functioning. And now we know so much more about the appease mode, you know, that people do. And I think that's the mode that I went into. For sure, I was in like parasympathetic activation. I remember thinking, I hope it doesn't sound bad. When you're like training a dog, or when there's an aggressive dog, you get low, right? Because I didn't want to be intimidating in any way. So I got out of bed and got on the floor. and looked up at him because he started sitting on the edge of the bed and Jackson was pretending to be asleep behind him. I just knew that something really bad was happening.
Just had a feeling.
And I said, you need to calm down. It's okay. It's all going to be okay. Then he reached under the bed and had a gun. He had a gun there. I don't know if he brought it in. It was under a towel or if it had been there the whole time. And he put it up to his temple and started saying all kinds of things about, you're killing me. This is what it feels like to kill someone. You did this. You're doing this. And everything went so slow. I have never experienced anything like that. I also had complete deja vu. I had this very strange sensation of, we've done this before. This is happening again. It was so acute. The last thing I said was, please don't do this. Jackson's right there. Because he was literally within a foot of him. And then he pulled the trigger. And he shot himself. And what I think about that is that I want to share. It's been shared with me that people who commit suicide regret it instantly. And they know this because people have like jumped off of buildings and survived. And they say the first thing that happens is they regret it. They remember thinking, God, why did I do this? I wish I hadn't done this. I swear to God, I saw that on his face the second it happened. He's like, I can't, if I could put words to it, it was, I can't believe I just did this. I wish I could take it back. And then we saw the color just completely drained from his face and he fell back. The trauma portion is so acute. Even, there was blood on my son. We had to pull him off of the bed. I yelled for the other two kids. I called 911. It's funny when things like that happen. Not even funny, but it's just interesting the way our brains work. Yeah. I think I had a BlackBerry at the time, and I was so frustrated because it was like kept hanging up, and I was calling 911. I had it on my shoulder, and I was trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. And the older kids came upstairs screaming, but the 911 operator told me to get him off the bed, and I couldn't do it by myself. So James and Devin and myself pulled him off the bed. Then I yelled for all the kids to get out of the room. And with a BlackBerry on my shoulder, I was instructed how to try to pump his heart and keep his heart beating. And eventually the sheriffs and the firemen and everybody came and they took over. But I sat there for a good, 5-10 minutes with the kids doing God knows what and pumping his heart on the floor. And I think I may have even put pressure on the gun wound on his head. I don't really even remember that part. And all of that is to share, one, it's good for me to just reflect and remember, but also it's the level of trauma. Yeah. I mean, that's some hard shit. There's no other way to say it. No. And the kids too. I mean, for sure, I think about my own trauma, but my God, my 10-year-old son had, his dad's brains on him, and heard all that go down, and the other kids came up. I mean, it doesn't get much more, traumatic than that. Yeah. So, they took him away. I also, we were able to donate all his organs. And that's why I share about the pumping the heart too, because weirdly I have like pride with that. I don't even know if it's weird. I just have pride with that. I kept his heart beating, and it's in a gentleman who lives in California now. Oh, wow. So he was pronounced brain dead, and my family and my community like swooped in. Helped so much. We didn't make a meal for ourselves for 6 months. Even like local businesses did things, donated food for the memorial service, let us stay at the DoubleTree for like some silly low rate because they had known Matt. We'd known the whole community and everything for a long, long time. So I still did yoga. I still did yoga, but that is when it transferred to PTSD. So there's a big difference between trauma and traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
I think a lot personally about like the gunas in yoga, the different energetic qualities. And the whole idea with yoga and also with Zen philosophy is not getting too extreme, right? We have to vacillate between things, but we never want to get too extreme. And PTSD is the definition of being in the extreme and not being able to come back. My nervous system, still to this day, I struggle with loud noises, different things like that. I get really activated, but especially at the time, I mean, I couldn't even feel my body. That's I was so numb and so disassociated and could barely function.
Yeah. And you have these 3 kids that you have to function for.
Yeah, exactly.
But also with the reality that you guys are hurt, that you're hurting, that there's pain. Yeah.
And that's exactly
loss.
the thing is, we all needed a lot. And I am proud of what I was able to give. It wasn't everything, but I was also taking care of myself. And I went to yoga class the day of the memorial. I went to yoga class. Honestly, it helped me more than anything, but that's when it became like so different than for the physical. It was when it became, I would just sob in Shavasana. It was like this purging and this cleansing and started slowly, so slowly, to make me feel kind of safe in my body again. And that's the thing is with PTSD, you really don't feel safe in the world. You don't feel safe in your body. And it's one of the gifts that yoga can start to give you in relation to trauma healing. Yeah. My dad passed away a couple months later. So that was ongoing because he was, like I said, late set Alzheimer's. But the amount of loss, suffering, and trauma from that year, I look back on it now. We just commemorated the 10-year anniversary of Matt's death as a family. And I'm so proud we survived.
Yeah.
We survived.
We're
all here.
Thriving.
Exactly. It's, I think that there are families, there's humans who couldn't survive something like that, And so I'm just extremely proud of the growth and the resilience and all of us.
I love that part that you said about PTSD, how it's the extreme and it's so much of yoga is about living within this middle space. And that has been this last year has been really one of my mantras is how do I live in the gray more? And how do I sit more comfortably in the gray? Because the gray can feel very unfamiliar because if we go this way or that way, black or white, which is what I grew up with and how a lot of us grow up with and also our society. But living in that middle space. So with that, how has, you kind of answered it, but how has yoga aided in freeing you most?
It's played different roles at different times, which I think also is one of the beauties of it. I mentioned early, it was my core's getting strong and I can put my foot behind my head now. And that's cool. And I can do arm balances. Yeah,
right?
exactly. And that's cool. During acute PTSD, it was, like I mentioned, kind of, I almost view my body and soul and mind being slowly woven back together, almost like each class would bring one thread back together and then another one consistently. Then as time progressed, right, and healing progressed, and I also want to be clear, I've used other modalities as well. Yoga's been a huge one, but I've done more therapy than
right.
I care to even think about and different types and all kinds of stuff, which is super important. I just want to, we need everything, right? Everything we can get. Then it's become one of the only times when I can calm my brain, right? Which is kind of what we were talking about. I still couldn't do seated meditation. Shavasana even was hard, but if the teacher would get me tired enough and kind of, I guess, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like caloric burn or sweat. It's more just like I had to think really hard and work really hard, even like engaging my inner thighs or, whatever those things are. I could then release at the end a little bit, little by little.
Yeah.
I like to say if I had a, dollar for every tear I shed in Shavasana, I'd be a billionaire, I promise. Yeah, exactly. Because it would just be this beautiful release, and crying is beautiful. It's such a wonderful release. And then, as time goes on, I see all these layers of healing, just being more aware of my nervous system and having these tools, the intention setting you did at the beginning of this, like becoming present into the space. Yoga does that for me, right? Becoming present in the moment, and even shifting my thinking, becoming more aware of like how proud I am of my kids versus I could choose to focus on, things that I wish for, that I want. I have this beautiful ability to kind of intercede and choose my perspective and choose my thoughts. And that's what it does for me now. And then there's this really beautiful, subtle energy that happens that I don't really have words for. And for me, when I'm teaching, it's at the end, if we do an Om, it's the space like after Om. And it's just, I could take guesses at what the words are for it, but it's, in my mind, it's the collective energy that we all are there trying to feel better, feel more present, be present in our bodies. And there's this energy that just gets shared, and it's so beautiful, and it's very healing to me. And I don't really have like, a scientific description for it or anything like that, but it's just really, really beautiful. And I hope it's that healing for everybody else too.
Yeah, that's for sure. That is the part, I think, of yoga that a lot of people don't understand, right? So you say, oh, you're a yoga instructor. Oh, I teach yoga. Or, oh, I do yoga. It's like, oh, you must be really flexible. It's like, I usually will say, no, I'm just really healing myself, because it's been more that than it has been about flexibility. Those are just the byproducts of the practice. But yeah, I love that. I love that so much. All right. We're going to have to cut this part out, but we'll get into the next question because my thing just went. All right. So we're wrapping up here, and I want to ask you, for anybody who's listening, who's maybe experienced trauma, what words of just like love would you extend to someone who's suffering and is in need of hope, or somebody who's feeling lost? What would you advise them or encourage them in?
Yeah, it's it gets better. I mean, it seems so simple, but it won't always feel that way.
Yeah.
And just that, to keep persevering. Perseverance is one of my favorite words for whatever reason. And don't give up. Keep persevering. Find the things that help you, and more than anything, be easy with yourself. I think I remember saying to a therapist early on, like, well, I want to be fine in a year. And she kind of laughed. I
like, okay.
And I really felt it. I was like, all right, I'm going to give myself a year to get my stuff together, and then I need to be fine. I'm here 10 years later to say, I still have pain. I still have sadness. And it sits differently in my body and mind and soul now than it did before. And I also believe it will continue to evolve. And then back like all the way to where we started, eventually, and I think this is where most people find the real kind of joy or purpose from going through trauma, is there's then the ability to share and help heal others. or even just, sometimes I don't like to think I'm necessarily like healing others, but I think even having conversations like this or being open, it limits aloneness. Like for other people who've gone through terrible things or going through difficulty, when we talk about like our kids growing up, I think we need to talk about that stuff more, because otherwise someone's going through it and they don't hear other people talking about it. They feel alone.
Yes.
Alone and
So
hopeless.
true.
So I'm here to say, like bad stuff happens, really bad stuff.
Yeah.
And also I, don't think I've done everything perfectly, but you keep going and it gets better and there's still joy to be had. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you just for opening up and being willing to share your vulnerability, your resilience, it's just been such a privilege. So thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you for doing this.
Yeah. And where can we find you? On social media?
Yeah.
Can I have a little shout out to your...
Sure. Yeah. Well, I live on the social media primarily for the studio, which is Empower Yoga _studios. And then we have a social media for the Climb and Strength studio and also for the lifestyle store. Yeah. We've started doing on the Empower Lifestyle Instagram, which is our clothing shop in the Claremont Village, little Mindfulness Mondays. And that's where I'm kind of sharing like poems or brief meditations or things like that. So if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, that's a good place to connect as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Be sure to follow livingpurposed.podcast on Instagram for more in-depth conversation and opportunities to get your questions answered and to be encouraged along this path to learning and living out our divine purpose. Let's live purposed together.